Has Valve ruined Counter-Strike Global Offensive by turning it into a movement shooter rather than a tactical shooter? Hey guys, and welcome to my channel. Time is but a window. Now, I was scrolling around Twitter one day when I saw this post. It reads, "People should stop trying to buy tactical shooters, then complain about it not being a movement shooter. Buy movement shooters instead." Then it goes on to say, "This is literally breaking games. Devs are instead trying to cater to those players which don't know what they want, and cause features and mechanics that don't belong there and are poorly thought out. This is what happened to Halo, COD, Counter-Strike, Fortnite, R6, and many more." Then he says, "You end up with games like Identity Crisis and bloated gameplay." Now honestly, this is something I've been talking about for a long time. As an old school Counter-Strike player, I have watched the movement change and evolve over time. But let's take a look back and see exactly how much the movement has changed since the beginning of Counter-Strike. Now when you hear about Counter-Strike 1.6, it's usually with a lot of nostalgia. And even most old school pros will say that Counter-Strike 1.6 probably had the best movement. But that wasn't always the case. When Counter-Strike first came out, it had a very different movement scheme. But Gooseman wanted this game to feel more like a chess match. So instead of keeping the movement like that, very fast-paced, he decided to slow things down. How did he go about doing this, you might ask? Now originally the biggest problem is that people would just bunny hop everywhere. Now eventually this was combated in patch 1.4 with a slowdown after every jump. Now this did not mean that you could no longer bunny hop, but that it would make it far more difficult to consecutively bunny hop. Now this exact same movement system would go on to make it into Counter-Strike Source, but would be taken away in CSGO. Here you can see in CSGO, you can make a jump, land, and continue with that same movement speed. Now there will eventually be a slowdown to your movement speed if you continue jumping. But you can definitely see how this new movement style would definitely contribute to you wanting to jump around far more. There's less of a punishment for missed jumps, and you can get away if you get caught out in the open, leading to the game feeling more like a movement shooter than a tactical shooter, where you need to pre-plan everything you're about to do and execute it perfectly. But let's take a step back. Counter-Strike 1.6 didn't have the perfect tactical shooter movement either. You see, there was a bug in the game that allowed it so that if you tapped crouch, you could do a little tiny hop instead of a big jump like hitting the spacebar. Now this allowed you to get information kind of like AD/AD spam in Counter-Strike Global Offensive without giving your opponent a fair shot at actually taking you down. But it also led to something much worse. Silent running. Silent running was the ultimate movement exploit, as it would let you increase your movement speed while masking most of your footsteps. This means that the opponent would only hear about one in every third footstep. But like I said, these movement techniques were mostly by exploiting the game's movement rather than how it was designed. When it comes to the design mechanics, this is as follows. Now, as far as I know, there's no way to show the movement screen from a console command like there is in CSGO. So I can't tell if the top speed is 250 units per second like it is in CSGO, but we'll go into Counter-Strike Source and look at it there in a moment. What we can see here is how the movement works when changing directions. There is a far larger slowdown between changing directions, which doesn't allow you to AD/AD spam as effectively. This can be seen much better with rifles. This means you're far more likely to commit to an angle and have to win your gunfights rather than just falling back playing like a slippery snake. For example, let's put them next to each other so you can just see how spammy the AD/AD fest is in CSGO. This one CSGO mechanic has completely changed how the game is played. No longer are people committed to holding angles, and this is all because the acceleration is far greater in CSGO than it was in prior versions of Counter-Strike, which has changed the meta from trying to outshoot your opponent to trying to dodge your opponent's bullets. Personally, this is one mechanic I'd love to see removed from the game. Now, a lot of people like this mechanic because it makes it harder for snipers to hit you. But let's look at how 1.6 handled this situation. Now first of all, when you scope in with an AWP, it slows down your movement speed slightly, but nowhere near as much as it does in CSGO. In CSGO, your movement speed is 200 and it drops down to 100 when you scope in, which is absolutely insane. Now personally, I think that Counter-Strike Source was the perfect compromise, giving you a movement speed of 210 when you're not scoped, and a movement speed of 150 when you were. But even though you had greater movement speed, there was one big trade-off. You always had to counter-strafe and come to a stop before you shot. This, however, is not the case in CSGO, where you can just hold down crouch and move around the map freely while still remaining perfectly accurate. When you try to do this in Counter-Strike 1.6 or Counter-Strike Source, you find that when you scope in with an AWP, it stops your movement completely. Well, maybe not completely, but it drops your movement speed to 3 units. This means that if you're crouching holding an angle, you have to commit to the angle. So was this enough to dissuade people from oversaturating the game with snipers? The answer for Counter-Strike 1.6 and Source is yes. But how is this the case with the AWP seeming far more powerful? Well, simply, it's because of the movement. You see, when the enemy can't jiggle around and slide away, you're much more likely to get that headshot, or at least hit them with enough bullets that they won't be able to get away. And on top of that, let's be honest, Counter-Strike's netcode isn't exactly perfect. So with the ability to AD/AD spam and jiggle away, people are far less likely to get hit. Which means that people are far more likely to use an AWP because all you need is that one bullet to register for you to get that kill. So is CSGO more of a movement shooter than prior incarnations of Counter-Strike? The answer is a resounding yes. But would Counter-Strike be put into a better position if they reverted back to the older movement systems? Well, as you guys know, Counter-Strike Global Offensive is currently the most played game on Steam, and it has higher numbers than both Counter-Strike 1.6 and Source did combined at their peaks. But is this really a function of the movement-based gameplay, or is it more of a result of when skins were added to the game? Well, let's look at exactly what would change if Valve decided to remove the AD/AD spam and acceleration issues. Firstly, you would still get the same mechanics when it comes to long jumping, strafe jumping, and limited bunny hopping. This means the exact things that most movement players are worried about losing from the game would still be in the game. Instead, what you'd probably notice is better registry and more consistent gameplay, with the better movement players having more emphasis on precision moving, basically putting us back into that area of perfect pixel peaks. But this also means that less precise players would be punished for it even more, putting them in a situation where they are going to drop drastically in skill ranking. Which means there will be a bigger gap between the best players and the worst players in Counter-Strike. While this sounds great for competition and major tournaments, it would probably make games more one-sided when you consider different skill groups playing against each other. This is why the entire money system was revamped and round system was revamped in the first place, so that even when there's mismatches in matchmaking, we still have close games, because people are far more likely to continue playing if they're not getting blown out and feel like they have a chance to bring it back. And right there is exactly why CSGO's inflated player numbers are not just skin deep. At the end of the day, these mechanics have been designed by a psychologist to keep you playing as often as possible and for as long as possible, rather than to give you the best gaming experience possible. So then Zool here is absolutely right. Devs are trying to cater these games to those players by adding mechanics that don't belong there. But where he's wrong is that they aren't poorly thought out. They are instead intentionally designed to keep people playing the game for as long as possible and to inflate the numbers by as much as possible, even if it technically leads to a worse game that lacks identity. So here's the question that I'm going to ask in this video, and I'd love you guys to answer it in the comments down below. Do you believe that Valve made the right decision? Do you believe that Valve should be contracting psychologists to determine the gameplay for Counter-Strike Global Offensive and tuning it to have the closest outcomes possible, or would you rather a more defined skill-based game which may have more blowouts? I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and as always, have a great day.